It is Monday, July 23rd, and time for another 28storms.com and Hurricane Tracker app tropical weather update. Starting off with the latest outlooks from the Hurricane Center, we see that they've dropped the highlighted area that they had yesterday near South Florida, as they no longer see any potential for tropical development. However, the latest long-range guidance for the Atlantic is becoming increasingly interesting. More on that in just a moment, but we're also dealing with a tropical disturbance in the East Pacific. As you can see, they are giving this feature a 90% chance of development, but it remains no threat to land. As we transition to the latest surface analysis from the Hurricane Center, you see that the Eastern Pacific System has a 1,000 millibar surface low associated with it, and the tropical wave that was moving across southern Florida yesterday is now spreading into the Eastern Gulf, and it once had a 1,020 millibar surface low, which is still relatively high, and it's also beginning to dissipate. Meanwhile, in the deep tropics, we've got a series of very weak tropical waves, and all of these are battling hostile conditions, so none of these are any threat. The latest enhanced infrared imagery shows that we're still dealing with a somewhat active weather pattern across South Florida today, and that is still the result of the remnants of the tropical wave. And there's also a tropical wave moving into the eastern Caribbean, and we've got a lot of convection across Central America, although much of this is related to the monsoon trough. You can see why no development is expected from any of these features, as we do have a mid to upper level trough diving down across Georgia, so this is making the eastern Gulf of Mexico unfavorable for any development, and the tropical waves down south are battling with a lot of dry air, especially across the eastern Caribbean. Farther to the east out across the central Atlantic, we also have another high amplitude tropical wave, but it's lacking any significant convection, and it too is also battling a lot of dry air in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere. Anything that does evolve over the next several days is going to be very slow to occur, but the next feature that may have to be watched is this tropical wave that is slowly exiting the coast of Africa, and some of the long-range or extended model guidance is alluding to the possibility of at least very slow tropical development from this wave as it moves generally west-northwest over the next 5 to 7 days. It should be noted, however, that not all dynamical models are buying into this tropical wave axis. As you can see here, the CMC model is showing at least some activity advecting out of the coast of Africa, but there is little to no organization to speak of in the 850 millibar vorticity forecast. To the contrary, though, we have seen a trend since Friday in the GFS and ECMWF models, and that trend has been for a stronger tropical wave axis to exit Africa, and no development would occur rather quickly across the East Atlantic. Instead, we would see a more slower evolution out across the central Atlantic, and as you see, by 168 hours or by day 7, the storm is still a good ways away from the Lesser Antilles, but we are seeing a tightening of the vorticity max as it approaches 45 degrees west longitude. Also, for the past week, the GFS has been showing improving upper level winds for development in the main development region between Africa and the Caribbean, and we continue to see this evolution in the latest 7-day shear forecast, and as we go into days 6 and 7, we've got a fairly extended ridge in the mid to upper levels, and this is very low vertical wind shear, and as long as those westerly winds near 20 degrees north remains north of the tropical wave axis, this would be a conducive setup, at least in terms of the vertical shear. Development would also be more likely beyond days 3 and 4, and that is mainly because dry air is more of a problem in the East Atlantic versus the Central Atlantic, and we can see some of this by looking at the 850 millibar theta E pattern, and you can see the progression of this feature. If we can get the animation to start, here we go. Beginning at 0 hours, you see the tropical wave moving westward, and instead of having any subsidence or very strong dry pockets advecting south into the main development region, we only see a slight bit out ahead of the wave axis, but conditions appear to be steadily improving as we go into days 5 through 7, and you can also see the system steadily beginning to organize, with potentially a second tropical wave axis exiting the coast of Africa by this time. And finally, this is the latest outlook from the ECMWF. It should be noted that the ECMWF is still not showing a well-organized tropical depression or tropical storm, but the model, much like the GFS, is trending stronger in terms of at least the vorticity max associated with the wave axis. It doesn't become very well defined until about day 6, but you can clearly see it near approximately 45 degrees west longitude and still moving toward the west-northwest, and as we go into days 7 through 10, this tropical wave becomes steadily more well-defined as it begins to move into the western Atlantic. Now, also keep in mind, however, that the track forecast for anything that is 10 days out is still highly in question. So just to summarize, nothing imminent is expected in the Atlantic Basin. Things should still remain quiet for the next 3 to 4 days, but thereafter the system with the most potential is this wave axis that will be exiting Africa over the next 24 to 36 hours. And as of right now, I would place the long-term development chances at around roughly 20 to 30%, but that could change depending on how well this wave axis holds together once it moves deeper out into the open waters. So that's all we have for now, but keep it tuned to 28storms.com and the Hurricane Tracker app as we continue to follow this wave's progress, along with all the other tropical disturbances that may develop in the Atlantic or Eastern Pacific for the remainder of hurricane season.